Tifa dance competition. Elaine Bennis beats them all. Okay, we're having a little fun here on the War Room. Let's bring in our guest now, Austin Petersen, from my home state of Missouri, trying to drain the swamp of Claire McCaskill, one of the most anti-man members of Congress. She truly just despises men. A lot of stuff on your plate, Austin. Obviously, you're fighting for free speech, tax reform, Second Amendment, doing something about the debt. But if I recall, were you dealing with some social media censorship not too long ago?
Yeah, it was kind of funny. I was giving away an AR-15 for my campaign, and they didn't have a problem with it. I was paying for them to promote the campaign, and they had no problem with that. But I specifically did a video where I talked about Claire McCaskill voting against our gun rights, and that they had a problem with. They took that video down and banned me for 30 days. They wouldn't respond to any messages asking why. And
this was on Facebook?
It was on Facebook, and what we found out was that their chief operating officer, Sheryl Sandberg, had contributed the maximum amount to Claire McCaskill, and that's all it took for us to go to the press with that. And when we pushed back, they wrote back and said, no, not a violation of the terms of service, and they unbanned me, but they still have the video deleted. Yeah.
That's total collusion against you. You're literally, so you've got Facebook and the government, in this case, Claire McCaskill, literally colluding against you.
Right, and it's just funny because they're under a lot of fire for election interference, taking a lot of money from Russian spammers for interfering elections, and then they leaned into our election and had silenced me and were promoting my opponent.
Wow. AustinForSenate.com. He's running against Claire McCaskill. You just heard it. The government is colluding with Facebook to try to keep Austin out of office. Why do you think that is, folks? Well, you know why. Austin, you know, it's pretty amazing right now. Free speech is one of your big topics. Free speech on college campus is something you talk about a lot. Very timely right now. You've got Richard Spencer, who's out speaking in Florida, regardless of whether we agree or disagree with what he's saying. He has the right to assemble. He has the right to free speech. But it seems like whenever a quote-unquote conservative or right-winger wants to have a speech, the left is always there to disrupt it and silence it.
Well, the problem with defending freedom is that you have to defend people even if you disagree with them. And the problem is that you're going to defend miscreants, you're going to defend bigots, you're going to have to defend people, even Nazis, because even Nazis in America have free speech. But the left is starting to push their agenda so hard now that they're conflating speech with violence. And they're saying that a certain type of speech could be considered a microaggression. And that's why you had to spend $600,000 on security to protect the students of Berkeley University in California, from a 5'3" tall Jewish kid, Ben Shapiro. It shouldn't have to be that way. And obviously, I don't support the views of people like Richard Spencer, but Richard Spencer should be able to say what he wants to say. The best way to counteract speech that you disagree with is speech that you agree with. And Ron Paul once famously said that we don't have the freedom of speech so we can talk about the weather. We have freedom of speech so we can talk about very dangerous things. And I'm afraid that we're putting our college students into these bubbles so that they're not going to be prepared to deal with the real world when they get out there. I mean, look what happens. They become NFL players and then they turn into snowflakes.
You know, this is actually incredible. You just said two things that really stuck out to me. One was I believe this is part of a social engineering program, specifically in the colleges, to equate speech. That's what has led to these people's responses to free speech. But then again, earlier I was talking about how they spent $500,000 on security at the University of Florida for Richard Spencer's speech. You mentioned how they spent $500,000 for Ben Shapiro's speech. They probably had to spend more than that for Coulter's speech, more than that for Milo's speech. So we're talking about millions and millions of dollars spent to protect the community from leftists. Literally, you're taking millions of dollars to have to protect the community from leftists. Why wouldn't they just decide to stay home? Maybe we could give that money to charity.
Well, true, but you know what the real problem, of course, is that when you have these publicly funded universities, you have to be able to protect people's free speech. If it was a private university could simply say, no, we refuse to allow Richard Spencer to speak on our campuses. But because of the collusion between our educational system and the government, in a sense, we have to finance the problems that are created by the left. And these universities are just turning into social justice warrior and communist factories, are just churning them out. Here in Missouri, you know what went on at the University of Missouri at Columbia.
It destroyed the university, Austin. The university has never recovered. Enrollment is down. They can't fill up all these new dorms they built. They can't win a football game. They can't do anything.
Yeah, I was actually at Northwest Missouri State University up in Maryville just last night talking to the college Republicans, and several of the people that I spoke to actually moved away from Columbia. They got away from Mizzou because they didn't want to be in that kind of environment, because they didn't feel like their views were going to be respected on campus. So we have to push back against what the social democrats' agenda has been. I mean, in many ways, we're very lucky that we don't have Hillary Clinton for president right now, because you know where she'd come down on these sides of the issues. And I'm running to be a senator from Missouri because I want to respect free speech. I want to respect our First Amendment. And as you heard earlier, I want to respect our Second Amendment as well.
Austin Petersen trying to help us drain the swamp of Claire McCaskill. Trust me, folks, she is truly a swamp creature. But it's amazing to me, Austin, when we talk about what happened at the University of Missouri and what we're continuing to see happen, and then you talk about some students you're talking to at Northwest Missouri University, which is obviously a smaller school. Most people have never heard of it. I remember I had friends that were seniors at the University of Missouri, Mizzou, in Columbia, Missouri, when I don't remember, 1946 or whatever it was, started happening. And they were telling me that if they weren't seniors, they would leave. If they weren't already in their senior year, they would have left. And they're advising, you know, younger siblings, younger friends, just don't even go near this school right now. It's a total disaster. I mean, this is what liberalism does.
Well, unfortunately, they're not teaching the Constitution in our schools, right? They're teaching some form of twisted methodology that it has a whole lot more to do with the type of people that I'm running against in this race on both sides of the aisle. I don't know if you had heard, but the current Attorney General of Missouri just jumped into this race last week, and Mitch McConnell and Karl Rove and the Swamp are pouring hundreds of thousands of dollars.
So they're really, you really got them frightened, don't you?
Yeah, actually, we hear that they weren't supposed to jump into the race until next year, but because of all of the endorsements and the momentum we've been picking up, we hear that they jumped into the race early because he didn't want to be seen as breaking his promise to voters that he was going to serve as Attorney General too early. It was just funny because as soon as he got elected, he didn't go to Jefferson City. He went straight to Washington, D.C. to meet with Mitch McConnell, and now they're out there pushing for the Attorney General of Missouri. Mitch McConnell and Chuck Schumer both have their picks in this race. They're pouring millions of dollars in it. All my money is coming from the grassroots supporters, active military members, single moms, construction workers, and that because they know that the only special interest that I have is liberty. But the swamp has got between both of us. They're trying to make it appear as if the Attorney General has the support of the conservative grassroots, but that's just not the case.
And who is that again?
Attorney General Josh Hawley campaigned last year that he wasn't going to run for higher office, and then immediately upon taking office, Mitch McConnell brought him to D.C. and encouraged him to break that promise, which he has done, and is now challenging me for the nomination of the Republican Party.
So that's going to be the conservative establishment candidate. And then you obviously got the swamp creature, Claire McCaskill, on the other side. But you are the grassroots candidate, absolutely. Austin Petersen is our guest. He's going to be with us for one more segment. AustinForSenate.com. He mentioned how they don't teach the Constitution in schools anymore. I'm actually wearing my high school lapel pin today. CBC High School in St. Louis. You couldn't graduate from my high school unless you got a 100% on the Constitution exam and a 100% on the Bill of Rights test. Here I am. All right, Austin Petersen is our guest. Final segment with him, AustinForSenate.com. Austin, one of the biggest things being talked about right now and brandied about is tax reform. And it seems like everybody wants tax reform, but it seems like there seems to be maybe a discrepancy on whether that means tax cuts or perhaps some people saying an increase of taxes. Tax reform is something that you're running on. If you were in the Senate right now, what would be your approach, or what approach would you advise President Trump take to tax reform? Obviously, he's basically dragging the turtle, Mitch McConnell, around behind him. But what do you think about what's being proposed right now for tax reform?
his plan. Those guys have been advancing the concept of fundamental tax reform, which is really what I want. In an ideal world, we'd get rid of the income tax and the IRS. But in the short term, as we move towards an actual free society, perhaps we can cut our corporate income tax rate in half. We can cut our personal income tax rate down to around 15%. We have the highest corporate income tax rate in the world. I mean, it's actually higher than China's right now. And so I applaud the president for his push for tax reform. I wish that the Senate Majority Leader would get on board and get his caucus in order, because right now the biggest problem are the obstructionists behind the swamp creatures, McConnell and others, Paul Ryan in the House. And I think that if we had time, we could push fundamental tax reform. Unfortunately, it seems as if the GOP can't seem to get anything done, and we may only get tax cuts, which I think is a bit of a missed opportunity, and it's part of the reason why I'm running. Because in the end of the day, what tax cuts are all about is creating jobs. If we could do things like get rid of the payroll tax, then we could get people to be able to put more food on the table and have a little bit more financial security. But as long as we have runaway government spending, a national debt of $20 trillion or more, then we're not going to be able to have the kind of growth policies that we really need in this country. We need free markets. We need to cut spending, cut taxes. We need to overturn Obamacare legislatively, and it's time to get the federal government off our backs.
And the president has a mandate, to me, on all of these things, especially when it comes to repealing Obamacare, especially when it comes to cutting the taxes. I mean, those two things to me, he's addressing the immigration issue. That thing is so crazy. Really, he just wants to follow the law and not have lawlessness at the border. But, I mean, I think about the president cutting taxes as a mandate. I think about him repealing Obamacare as a mandate. The problem is, as you said, we've got all of these blockades in Congress. You know, I'm just curious, if 2018 comes around and we elect the right people to get into the Congress to not only give the president the mandate, but also the Congress behind it, do you think that this could be the kind of thing where we don't actually see any movement until 2018 if we get a right Congress in order?
Yes, unfortunately, I think that we're only going to be able to pass the sort of fundamental reforms that we want to see if we have a mandate in the Senate. 60 seats would be the tiebreaker, or the filibuster breaker as well. And I think that we've got an opportunity here to do so, but we need to make sure that we're vetting our candidates properly across the country and find out where the money is flowing into who. Of course, you got Steve Bannon out there and Breitbart trying to take out some of these Republican incumbents. We're not sure what kind of stability that might lead to. But if we had some good constitutional conservatives in there, people like myself who want to go help Rand Paul, Mike Lee, Ted Cruz, and others stay the course and support the president's agenda for tax cuts, cutting regulations, and having real reform, then I think we can do what we really want to do. And I applaud the president for doing exactly what he said he was going to do for campaigning. A lot of presidents, they campaign one way, and then when they get in office, they do the opposite. But I believe that if the Senate had been able to pass a repeal of Obamacare, the president would have signed it. And I was excited to see that Senator Rand Paul had given the president his greatest accomplishment, which was to make it so that individuals could purchase insurance across state lines. And a lot of people on our side were critical because they were saying, well, this shouldn't be done by executive order. But executive orders interpret existing law. They're not supposed to create new laws. And all the president did with that executive order was to interpret the law that already allows corporations to purchase insurance across state lines, to create insurance pools. It allowed individuals to do the same. Why should the corporations be able to get that benefit? And then individuals like myself, like my insurance was canceled a couple of months ago because they won't be able to provide it in the individual insurance market. Now the president and Rand Paul have essentially made it so that there will be what the liberals are calling a dangerously unregulated insurance market, which is very exciting because that might mean we'll get lower prices next year, so that middle America, people like myself and farmers in Missouri, can actually afford insurance.
Yeah, they're freaked out because they're not going to have total control over the insurance market. And you know what, the picture you're painting is accurate, because Trump basically took what Obamacare did, which was put these insurance providers above the law and monopolistic, and said, no, you're going to have to compete for rates, and you're not going to be above the law in that regard. You mentioned Bannon. Has Steve Bannon reached out to you?
We have not heard from the Breitbart people. We've heard some rumors. I think this is wishful thinking on their part. Rumors that they might be supporting my opponent, the Mitch McConnell-backed candidate in the race. But there's actually been no direct contact on our part with the Breitbart team. Obviously, it'd be great to have their support. But I was a libertarian last year. I was not a Republican, so that might be problematic on my part, and I have to own up to that. I have been a believer in liberty. I still am, but there is an R after my name now. But I haven't seen any actual overt support from the Bannon people to the Hawley people, even though that's being reported. I think that's actually some wishful thinking on the behalf of the liberal media, who wants that to be true so that they could tar and feather Hawley with the sort of the racist bigot brush like they always do. But from everything that I've seen, it seems like the Breitbart people are mostly focusing on Republican incumbents that they're trying to primary, people like Jeff Flake out in Arizona, and others who are up for re-election who are not supporting the president. So in my mind, it seems that the Breitbart people are mostly going to stay out of their race. I'm having to grassroots it, bootstrap it the whole way.
Well, I feel like you're the perfect candidate for someone like Bannon to get behind. So hopefully I would hope that he would reach out to you, because he's trying to break up the Republican establishment. And that's exactly what I think you would be doing. 60 seconds, Austin Petersen, AustinForSenate.com. Final words.
Yeah, I just want to say that we don't just need another Republican in the U.S. Senate. That's not really what the solution is. We need the right type of Republican, a constitutional conservative who will go to Washington, D.C., drain the swamp, cut spending, cut taxes, get rid of Obamacare like the Republicans have been promising, and go to drain the swamp. That's what I want to do. I want to get the federal government off our backs, and I hope that your supporters will go to AustinForSenate.com and help us do that.
Thank you, Austin Petersen. Always a great guest, always good to catch up with you. And I want you to drain the swamp of Mitch McConnell, or excuse me, Mitch McConnell would be nice, but Claire McCaskill is who you're running against. It'd be nice to get her out. Thank you, Austin Petersen. AustinForSenate.com. Folks, all I do is I look at who's running in this race, I look at who they're running against, and I find candidates that I want to get into Congress so that we can do exactly what he just described. Let's get behind the president by voting the right people into Congress. And please, Claire McCaskill has got to go.